Do please be seated. For the next few weeks leading up to Pentecost, we sort of stay in Easter mode. We're in the season where Christians remind themselves that we are Easter people and love is our calling. We're moving on from the high and holy days we celebrated last weekend. I wonder if you were here. You may have been here on Good Friday. It was a day when so many said, no, I want nothing to do with this Jesus. Judas had said no. I don't want to be part of this anymore. And he betrayed Jesus, turning him over to the Jewish leaders, who also said no, as they engineered his arrest, pressed false charges, and demanded his death. Caiaphas, the high priest, certainly said no. He must not live. It's better for one man to die. Peter said no. I don't know this man. And when pressed, denied him 3 times before the rooster crowed. Herod said no and mocked Jesus and sent him back to Pilate. The crowd said no. We want Barabbas set free, not Jesus. And Pilate gave his no. No to justice. He capitulates to the crowd. Give them what they want. I wash my hands of the whole affair. The Roman soldiers said no, as they jeered and whipped him, dressed him up in a royal robe, put a mock crown of thorns on his head, spat on him, led him away, and then crucified him. So many refusals. One after another, they said no. And then there was God's great yes. You may have been here on Easter Sunday. What a day. What glorious music. Greg's wonderful introit on Easter Day. That was something, wasn't it? Tony's artwork. Lots of very excitable children. So many good things on Easter Day. Resurrection Sunday is a joyful endorsement of the mission of Jesus. We celebrated God's loud yes to grace and mercy, compassion and forgiveness. God's clear yes to that way of being in the world, with its love of neighbour, love of enemy, with its Father forgive them, for they know not what they do. And we were invited to add our yes. Yes, I want to be part of that. I want to participate in that ongoing project and to join all those who are prepared to say, we are Easter people and love is our calling. And so we find ourselves here today in this ongoing 50-day Eastertide season before Pentecost. And over 6 Sundays, we're going to turn our attention to a stunning little letter written in the 1st century to a small group of Christians in the town of Colossae. And I don't know whether you read the community news. Matt introduced the series, and he reckons that the message of Colossians is simple. Saying yes to Jesus changes everything. One of the books on my bookshelf that I treasure is this little one, Going to Church in the 1st Century. It's a book by Robert Banks, who, much like our beloved Bruce, has been a serious thought and significant Christian thought leader for many decades, both here in Australia and also abroad. This is a story of a young Roman citizen, Publius Rufus, who's away from home on business and he's staying with some of his old friends. They're putting him up for a few days. And while he's with them, they take him along to the home of a Jewish couple for a meal and a little bit more. He heads off. He meets his Jewish hosts, whom he discovers have adopted a new way of looking at the world. And so have many of the others who arrive at their home for the meal, for the gathering, for church. And Publius Rufus has got lots of time to chat to them as everybody catches up on how things are going for this person and that. They're like family, he thinks. They even greet one another affectionately like brothers and sisters, a little bit too affectionately for his liking. Publius is shocked that one of the attendees, a slave, is welcomed on the same terms as many of the others who are of a much higher social rank. This is most irregular, he thinks. And what's more, when it's time to eat, the slave is offered food first, not last. This isn't quite what I bargained on, we find him saying on several occasions. They eat, they break bread and drink wine in such a way, they are told, as to represent and remember their Lord. They discuss amongst themselves how they should conduct themselves in certain very tricky circumstances in which they found themselves in the course of their everyday lives. And they read part of a letter by Paul to help them figure it out. One of the children asks if she could sing a song that she's made up about, quote, all the different things that God has given us. There's more singing and some praying, although Publius thinks it's a very casual sort of prayer, more like they're simply talking to their God. They welcome a newcomer into the community by placing their hands on him. Someone tells a story about King David, and a few people, both men and women, have something to say that's on their heart and mind. Eventually, after a few hours, after lots of talking and discussion and eating, they take their leave. And as they leave, he notices how some of the food and a bit of money is quietly pressed into the hands of a couple of slaves who look like they could do with any bit of assistance they could get. As he makes his way home with his friends, discussing the events of the afternoon and evening, Publius thinks to himself, although things turned out very differently to what I expected, by and large, I'd have to say that I enjoyed the evening. The people themselves certainly impressed me, and despite my misgivings about some of the proprieties they disregarded, beliefs they entertained, and enthusiasms they gave rein to, there was something about their interchange, both during the meal and after it, that strangely commended itself. There was something about their goings-on that was unmistakably real. Well, this little book has helped me over the years to think through what it must have been like, really like, to go to church in the first century, whether it was in Jerusalem or Rome or the little town of Colossae, which was located in what we would know as Western Turkey. Now, as I say, over the next few weeks, we're looking at this letter to the Colossians, to the little group of Christians who met very much in the way that I've just described. They would have received this letter and someone would have read it out loud as part of the meal, their gathering, their weekly coming together for church in someone's home. It may well have been written from prison by the Apostle Paul, and he writes to encourage them as to how they might think and act Christianly in the circumstances in which they found themselves. And part of the encouragement of the letter is this: don't be distracted, don't drift from Jesus. He's central, he's fundamental, he's the beating heart of your faith. Keep your eyes fixed on him, learn from him, learn from the way that he washed his disciples' feet, learn from the things that he said and the things that he did. Keep saying yes to him and allow yourself to be formed and shaped and changed by him. I like the saying that life is best organised as a series of daring ventures from a secure base. Jesus is our secure base. Don't drift from him. That seems to be a big part of the letter to the Colossian Christians. And today, as we ease our way into the epistle, I simply want to pick up two things from our reading. First of all, Paul says, I give thanks for you. Actually, he's not alone. He says he writes this with Timothy. So he says, we give thanks. Indeed, he says, we always give thanks for you. We've heard that you've said yes to Jesus. We've heard of your faith and that it's bearing beautiful fruit in your lives. Twice he mentions their love for Jesus, for God, for one another, for neighbour, for stranger, and so on. Paul gives thanks for all of this. And secondly, Paul prays for them. Indeed, he says, from the day in which we have heard of your faith, we have not ceased to pray for you, praying that you might be filled with the knowledge of God's will, praying that you might lead a life worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him. Paul prays for them. He prays that their faith might be firm, informed, and enduring, even in the midst of hard times, that they might patiently endure and maintain their Christian joy. As I finish up, I have a little suggestion on the back of this, an invitation for you. That in this season of Eastertide, which like Lent, it provides us with a period of time, a 50-day period between Easter Sunday and Pentecost. I invite you, or I make the suggestion that in this season, we step up a little bit in these two areas, giving thanks for one another and praying for one another. Can we let this letter to the Colossians, this opening section anyway, nudge us in that direction? Maybe we can even begin right now. Look around. Is there someone that you could give thanks for? There are so many people here at South Head, my precious spiritual home, who simply make my heart glad to be with them and to even think of them. Maybe yours too. What about giving thanks, heartfelt thanks for each one of us, each in our differences, with all our differences? That's the first thing. And what about praying for one another? Praying that we might live Christianly as Easter people whose calling is love. Deepen their faith. Help them cultivate a sense of your presence in the everyday business of life. May they grow in Christian character, sustain Christian patience and hope when the world seems like it's descending into despair and darkness. These are the things that we might well pray for one another, that we might live wisely and well and in a Christian manner, day in and day out. Giving thanks for and praying for one another during Eastertide, starting right now. I leave you with that task and that invitation. Amen.